Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our podcast, Your Gardening Questions from Plant Talk Radio. If you have a gardening question you'd like our host Fred Howard to answer, send him an email. The email address is fred@planttalkradio.com. Now for today's question. We said this week that Chris was going to be here, so we asked people to send in their tree questions. In fact, they've been coming in for the last couple of weeks, and the first one is from Chuck, and he says, I planted a Cleveland pear about 4 years ago, and it's been growing beautifully. However, this spring I came home from work and found a major branch had broken off, and I just brushed it off thinking maybe my young neighbor had hung from it or something. But today I came home and found another major branch hanging off, and now I'm thinking there must be something wrong with the tree. Now, looking at the tree closely, I noticed there are these thin lines on most of the branches. So, Chris, what do you think's going on there?
Well, a few things. One is the pear tree. So pears are very prone to breaking, especially if you take a look at the structure of the tree. A lot of times there's a trunk and then it splits into 3, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 branches. So I would almost bet that where those branches are breaking, there's multiple branches coming from that point, and it's just a weak point in that tree. The tree pears can be nice if they're structurally pruned when they're young and a nice central leader with scaffold, horizontal branches. But I think in this case, I'd be curious of where those branches are breaking from.
Yep.
As far as the lines, I'm going to guess that it might be cicada damage.
It could be. And I was thinking about the lines. We would actually have to see it for sure. And cicadas, of course, is an insect, and it's the female laying eggs in the branches. It can, in itself, kill. However, normally, it's just a twig or two or enough to, let's just say, make the tree look a little shaggy the following year. Not that big a deal. But also, back in time, a nursery was hit with cicada damage to the point that they were probably a little on the edge business-wise anyhow, and it took them out of business because what they had to prune out was going to be a 3-year setback on crop. And when you miss 3 years of income, you're hurting.
Definitely. And a lot of times that cicada damage, like you said, it's just the tips. It's just, it makes it look rough.
Right. And the other thing that might be causing the lines, Chris, is this business of codominant stems where they're growing and pushing on each other, which leads to this breakage. And that might be the fine lines between the branches too. So we'd have to see a picture of that. But I'm thinking, like you said, it's principally the matter that it's a pear.
So reading between the lines here, it sounds like the pear would not be on your most recommended list, and if not, what would be a good alternative if you like the way a pear looks, especially in the spring with the flowers?
A couple of answers to that, Mark, but I want to go backwards and not condemn all pears, because a pear tree is much like a child. You better start raising them properly, directing their activities when they're very, very young. And I mean like 6 months and on from there. Because you can't wait and hand a kid that hasn't been trained car keys at the age of 16 and expect them to do the right things. And it's the same. Well, it's philosophical, but it's the same kind of thing where you better have taken care of that pear tree every couple, 3 years with thinning, spacing, and so on. And then it becomes a fine tree, beautiful fall color, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't condemn them all, but my first thought when you asked that, and I have one in my own yard, or some, pawpaw trees have that same pear-shaped direction, big fat leaves in this case, but when they're out in the sun, they can be a beautiful symmetrical tree, much like a pear. When they're in the shaggy, shady areas at the bottom of the forest, they can grow 16 different directions, and you wouldn't recognize them to be the same tree. I don't know. What else would you think of, Chris?
First off, I was thinking like a maple. You're going to get that. You can get a similar shape and similar fall color. You don't get the flower though in the springtime.
Right.
If you go to like the cherries, you might get the flower, but then it's a different shape, different kind of fill of the tree. I really can't think of something that's going to be the flower and the shape and the fall color.
Nor I. And many a time, if you're watching by moonlight in the spring, the pear tree is so white as to glow in the moon, or glow with the light of the moon, I should say. So it's hard to replace, but it's one of those things that absolutely mandates care along the way.
And you're right. Prune it once or twice a year. Just a couple cuts, and when that tree is older, you're going to have a beautiful specimen tree. but you're going to have to prune that once a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, well, like I say, it's like raising a kid. You can't wait and turn them loose at 16 with no direction.
You don't throw them in the other room and bring them out 10 years later.
Yeah, something like that.
It doesn't work that way.
No.
Now I know where my parents went wrong. Hey, thanks again for listening to our podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our other podcasts as well, the Plant of the Week podcast and the Plant Talk Radio podcast, all on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to sponsor a daily podcast, contact us at fred@planttalkradio.com. To find out more about Fred Hauer and Plant Talk Radio, visit our website, planttalkradio.com.
Circle270media.com